Understandably, most participants in a Melbourne Music Marathon event or the Ron John or Rocketman triathlons focus mainly on finishing. If all goes well, they don't think about the preparations, the planning, and security that go into such an event. My guest today earns his living from that part. Event organizer Mitch Varnes is a Brevard County native who has evolved from promoting the East Coast Premier Professional Surf Contest to putting on marathons, triathlons, and most recently, the Ron John Beaches and Boards Fest. Varnes has learned to navigate government red tape and some wild swings in the sporting goods industry that most often sponsors events. He seems to know a little bit about everything. Here's what Varnes had to say. Mitch, you're involved in so many things. I know the Melbourne Music Marathon, the Rocketman Triathlon. What else? Give us a sense of some of your signature events that you
Cocoa Beach Triathlon.
Okay.
USA Beach Running Championships, which are coming up October 27th. We also did the World Beach Running World Championships. Big event I'm working on now is Beach and Boards Fest that Ron John's Surf Shop and I co-own, and we premiered it last March in the area. And don't do too much in the summer, but I sure work a lot the rest of the year.
Tell me a little bit about that surfing event that you did. For years, I know that you worked on a Sebastian Inlet Pro surfing event. Is this kind of the next step in that, or is it something different?
Yeah, the Sebastian Inlet Pro was really a marquee event, Matt. It was the biggest surfing event ever held in Florida and second biggest ever on the East Coast. It went on from 2005 to 2010 and basically attracted all the biggest and best names in the surfing world, everybody from Kelly Slater to John Florence, Dane Reynolds. They all came here to Florida and did this event at Sebastian Inlet. And the bottom just kind of dropped out of the surfing market around 2008 and 9, and that was a really expensive event to produce. So the next logical step was working with Ron Johns to create something new and different and actually more relevant.
What goes into an event like this? I mean, you know, those of us who participate, we show up, we get our number, our chip, we run. We may look around and notice all the different equipment or all the different people working on it. Give us a sense of what goes into the planning and the execution of a major sporting event like that.
Well, you start out by picking a venue, of course. You got to have something that's exciting, because the truth is running's not fun. And you want to make it fun, whether it's putting music on the course, having lively water stops, or having a great venue. And around here in Brevard County, I think we're really blessed to have 72 miles of ocean and riverfront and some great causeways. So we have some really good venues here. So you pick a venue, then you worry about permitting. You have to get the city or county's approval on it, which generally is very easy to do. The municipalities around here, they get it. Indy Atlantic, Melbourne, Cocoa Beach, they love the events. It's a good crowd, and so they're easy to work with. Then you bring in a governing body, whether it be USA Triathlon or USA Track and Field. Then you start marketing the event. I work real closely with Rob Varley and Colleen over at the Space Coast Board of Tourism. They help me with branding and marketing events that bring people into our area. So you get that going, and then you start marketing the event, advertising, opening up for registration. You find a timing company, and there are several good timing companies throughout Florida, particularly Orlando area. You bring them in to assist you. You make your shirts, you make your medals, you have good food, maybe you have beer at the finish line, and tends to be pretty, there's a lot of details.
Right.
But they all kind of just, it's a formula. They all fall in place together.
So the profit from it comes primarily from people entering the event and participating, or is there other sources such as sales or?
Yeah, well, like on the Melbourne Music Marathon, that's largely supported through sponsorship.
Okay.
Very expensive race to put on. I shut down both causeways, Melbourne and O'Galley, 2 lanes of US 1, all of Riverside Drive on the beach side, all of downtown Melbourne. I mean, I employ probably 50 police officers on that weekend.
Wow.
And then I have my staff, the paid staff, of course, volunteers. I have about 20 musical acts that I paid to perform on that course. So it's a really expensive event. So what we try to do on that one is we've really worked to turn that into Melbourne's community event, signature event. It doesn't cover it, but I try to get sponsorships to cover the costs, essentially. And then the profit back at my company, Smooth Running, would come from registrations and whatever's left over after all the costs.
So how much does it cost to shut down a bridge or to hire a police force like that?
Well, just as an example, I think police support on that is around, it's over $25,000 just in police support.
Okay.
But what people don't think about is coning, like coning roads in a race. On the Melbourne race, I used 4,600 cones. Okay.
And someone's got to put out all those
4,600 cones. And I contract with Bob's Barricades to do that. And I didn't know this, of course, and nobody would unless you're in the business, but Bob's actually has a marathon division. And what these guys do is every single weekend, they're working a race somewhere in the state of Florida, basically.
Really?
From November to March. And they buy, I've learned they go out in November, and they buy brand new cones. They'll buy like 10,000 cones or whatever they need. And the cones they had from the previous year, they put out on the highways. So Disney is the first big race in Florida in the year, in January. They go out to Disney, which is like 12,000 cones. So they put that all over to Disney course. And there's a couple other races between me and Disney. So when people do our race in Melbourne, we actually have squeaky clean orange cones on the course. And it's just really, really a good look. And Bob's only uses those for road races. And then again, the end of the year, they'll put them out on the road and buy new ones.
Because they know that for people like you and the people in the events, the appearance really counts. Probably for Disney, it's really a matter of keeping in touch with Disney's level of service that they expect of anybody that sets foot on their property.
Yeah, and what's funny is every single year I get compliments. They're like, you have so many cones on this course, and they're orange. I mean, they're not splattered with asphalt. They're nice cones.
Tell me a little bit about what it's like to work with the city. You said it's pretty easy. I know that Melbourne's new city manager used to be the CEO of USA Track and Field. I mean, are they looking to do more? Do they encourage this kind of thing, or do they just kind of accommodate it when you ask?
Mike McNeese and I have had several conversations. He was CEO of USA Track and Field, as you said, and our race in Melbourne is actually a national championship USA Track and Field race. We are the Half Marathon Masters Championship for the nation. So all the best runners 40 and over, and have been since 2009, all the best runners 40 and over come to Melbourne to run a half marathon. Zola Budd, Frank Shorter, Bill Rogers, we've had all kinds of names that have plopped into Melbourne to run a race, and a lot of other Olympians have come into town. As far as Melbourne goes, they're really receptive. Mike's been good to work with, the city clerks are great to work with, and basically they're real accommodating. I think the police officers are good to work with. They get it. It's like, we're filling hotel rooms, people are eating in restaurants, let's work with this guy and make it happen.
Tell me how you got into this business. What's your background?
I'm a sixth generation Floridian. I was actually born at Patrick Air Force Base. So my birth certificate says Cocoa Beach.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I went to BCC and UCF, did a little graduate work at Florida Tech, but I started at NASA right out of college at UCF, and I was in public affairs. And public affairs with NASA involved doing space shuttle launch countdowns, traveling with astronauts, putting on events, working as staff at events. So basically, I learned how to put on events and do events through working with NASA for 10 years. And the cool thing about the time I was with NASA, which was 1983 to 1994, is that was the real heyday of the shuttle program. And we had a lot of money to spend on events, and there was basically, it's bad now that I'm in the business, but we had no budget. So we could do whatever we wanted to do, and basically learned how to put on a good show.
Interesting. And so what was your first event that you did as a private promoter?
I think one of the very first events I did as a private promoter was right after the Challenger accident. I was still working for NASA, and the Astronauts Memorial Foundation was just founded by a guy named Alan Hellman, I believe. He was architect out of Winter Park. But he created the Astronauts Memorial Foundation, which now has the big mirror at the Space Center. And I mean, they were just starting to try to bring money in. And I approached him out of the blue. Hey, I work in NASA Public Affairs. I want to put on a surfing contest. And so we did a surfing contest in Cocoa Beach, and Sean Slater won it. Kelly Slater got second in it. And that's when the Slater, you know, Kelly was probably 15, 14, something like that. So we had them there in Cocoa Beach. We probably had 100 people in it. I gave all the proceeds to the Astronauts Memorial Foundation, I think maybe $3,000 or $4,000. But that was my first event that I put on by myself, and actually the very first fundraiser for them.
Very interesting. You mentioned earlier that in relationship to the Sebastian Inlet Pro event, that there was a point where the companies, the bottom sort of fell out of surfing a little bit. Explain, what did you mean by that?
Well, what happened, Matt, is like when the whole economy fell apart in the nation in 2007, 2008, whatever it was, that the surf industry was hit especially hard, because you don't have to go out and buy your kids $60 board shorts and shirts. I mean, you can go to Target and get them for $20.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people just started, you know, thinking twice about how they were spending the money, and it had an impact on the bottom line of the surf world. I mean, if you're just a consumer and a general surfer, you had no idea what was going on, but it really affected the bottom line of their sales.
Because surfing seems to be as big as ever.
It's about as big as ever from a participant standpoint,
Yeah.
but the industry by and large has really reined itself in. If you compare how many contests are held, and contests I mean like pro events sanctioned by the Association of Surfing Professionals, yeah, it's probably a quarter to a third what it was 8 years ago. Really pulled back. It's made it very difficult for budding pro surfers to find events to qualify for the World Tour, but especially hard to get the sponsorships, because what's happened with the sponsorship world in surfing is you're either at the top and you get all the money, or you're 16 years old and the next big thing and you get all the money. So the people in between don't really have the money to travel to go to contests.
I see.
It put a squeeze on them is what it does.
So it has to be a bigger purse, and there need to be better sponsorships.
Exactly.
But, so some of the big companies that I knew were involved in sponsoring would be like Billabong, Quicksilver. These are the companies that you're talking about that at one point were really going strong, but then were hit by the recession and everything else?
And bad investments, too. I mean, Quicksilver bought a company called Rossignol, the ski company,
yeah,
and really took a beating on that. They had to sell it several years later. They also bought Cleveland Golf. So Quicksilver, as an example, got into an interest they had no right being in, skiing and golfing. I mean, they're a surf and action sports brand. Billabong made some acquisitions maybe at the wrong time, which turned out to be part of its downfall. But by and large, you know, they're coming back. They're working their way back. They've tightened things in. They laid off a lot of staff, and I mean, good or bad, but they've really pulled everything in, and they're looking better.
What can you say about the state of competitive surfing in Brevard County? Are we still the East Coast capital of surfing?
Absolutely. I think Cocoa Beach is the epicenter. Sebastian Inlet is the best surf spot in Florida, no question. So right here in Brevard County, we have that. The greatest surfer of all time is from Cocoa Beach, an 11-time world champion, Kelly Slater, and we also have several other people that have made the World Tour. So, and basically the center of surfboard manufacturing is right here in Brevard County, largely in Rockledge and Cocoa. Probably 80% of all surfboards on the East Coast are made in Brevard County.
Really?
So we're still very much the mecca for surfing.
You also, one of the biggest events that you've put on in the past year, made news, probably not for some of the reasons that you wanted to at times, was the Rocket Man Triathlon. Mm-hmm. By all accounts, it was a big success as a triathlon went, yeah, and I know people in Titusville were happy with it, but you ran into some red tape with the federal agencies. Explain.
Yep. I've worked years trying to put on a triathlon at KSC in Titusville. The Rocket Man Florida Triathlon was the event. We did the swim in Titusville. Bike ride went out to KSC, around the launch pads, past the vehicle assembly building, and then the run was in Titusville. And it took me almost 4 years for NASA to give me permission to allow this to happen. And we were proceeding all along with the event. We announced it August of 2012 for May 2013. It was going well. We had entrants from 49 states and 16 countries. We sold out every single hotel room in Cocoa and Titusville, a real boon for Titusville. But around January, 5 months before the event, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service notified me that they weren't good with it, and they didn't want our participants riding bikes on their little 6 mile of course. So it turned out to be a near disaster. We brought in a lot of politicians. Bill Posey was instrumental in making the event happen. He actually flew down from Washington, D.C. and met with the Fish and Wildlife people and said, okay, why can't we have this event here? And he kept pushing the issue all the way through, he and his staff. Titusville, particularly Walt Johnson, who's a city councilman, Mayor Jim Tully, the whole Titusville City Council, Rob Varley and the Board of Tourism, Robin Fisher, all these people came on board, and all of a sudden, what was just a regular triathlon running event was like a huge...
A lobbying effort.
A political thing, yeah, because everybody else was good with it. And long story short is 9 days before the event, Fish and Wildlife hit me with they approved the permit, but they hit the event with a fee of, with security, was over $40,000. That was due right away. So...
That's a bigger fee than you mentioned earlier in the program. You would pay for some major things putting on the marathon.
Yeah, well, this is just a permitting fee.
Okay.
This was just to like allow us to use 6 miles of their roads.
And you're getting the permit 9 days before this event.
Correct. So basically I had two options. Appeal it and say this is outrageous, because I had been told the fees would be about $10,000.
Okay.
But if I appealed it, I'm not going to get my permit, and the event's canceled. And then it's back on me.
I see.
So I'm like, okay, I just got to suck it up, pay this thing, and that's that. We did an event. So, you know, it's history. It was a hard pill to swallow at the time, and still is to think about it, but we had an awesome event. I mean, it was a great thing for Titusville and the whole area, and particularly it brought people that never would have been to not only Titusville, but to KSC or the visitor center. We brought them into our area. They ate in the restaurants. They stayed in the hotels.
If you're going to introduce somebody to Brevard County, what a way to do it than from a bicycle, traveling among our most signature installations and in our history as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they had to do a study, it sounded like, about the environmental impact of all these bicycles going down their road through the Canaveral.
Yep.
Did you ever see the study and what they said?
I did see the reports.
What is the impact?
The study alone was about $37,242 to study the effect of bicycles on birds, black indigo snakes, and gopher tortoises. Okay?
Okay.
And the end result was the Fish and Wildlife Service, who actually did the study. They determined that bicycles had much more of an impact on birds than cars or anything else. That when birds saw bicycles coming, they took flight because they were scared and they were gone. And I never heard about the gopher tortoises and snakes, but that's essentially it. And I think the big problem with when you look at how Fish and Wildlife and the National Park Service operate, and they do some amazing stuff, no question. I mean, they're protecting our lands, but they operate in the era of Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, they're happy to tell me that they killed 7,000 ducks on the refuge last year, but they don't want bicyclists riding by. So it's just doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about the preservation.
Okay, well I'm gonna. I have a hard time picturing bicycles hurting anything. You know, not like they're.
The whole thing is they said the pedaling motion scares the birds, and when you're driving by in your car, birds don't see that. So that was the report.
Okay, so now are you going to have the event again?
Yeah, we're intending to have the event next May 18th. NASA has approved it. We're moving it to 405, which is by the Visitor Center in that area. We would incorporate the Tycho Warbird Air Museum, part of the Astronaut Hall of Fame area, and they would just enter 405. And that being said, Fish and Wildlife has approved it, NASA's approved it, National Park Service has approved it, and the challenge right now is working with Delaware North, the operator of the Visitor Center. We've gone a couple times on a contract. They actually control what happens at KSC from a promotional standpoint, and right now we're at odds with each other. So I'm not sure it'll happen next year. But again, NASA has approved it, Fish and Wildlife has approved it, Titusville's endorsed it. That's my only barrier right now is Delaware North. Okay, well we're getting it lined up, and hopefully it won't be 9 days.
We get emails that you hear.
Yeah, well I'm at a point, Matt, where it's going to happen or it's not, and it's going to be announced in the next few days. If I'm going to do an event next May, I should be marketing it 3 months ago.
Right.
Because last year we announced the event in August for May, and here we are mid-October already. So it's a critical mass.
What is it about triathlon? Why is that a particularly attractive event? Was it just what was next for you, or is it something that we really want to try to get?
My background is running and surfing. That's what I've kind of grew up doing and participated in through my 20s and 30s, and started getting into triathlons, trying to do one a year. And there are some good triathlons in our area. Pineapple Man's one of the biggest in Florida, certainly, for a regional event. And I just saw the demographics. If you look at the average income of a triathlete that actually travels to races, it's $123,000. Their bikes average, $6,000 to $10,000 each. They stay on 3 nights on average where they go, and they travel with their spouses and kids. So it's a really good thing for an area. Obviously a good demographic, and just a good fit. So that's why I moved into it.
It's funny. I was thinking the other day about a column I did about riding over the Pineda Causeway on the new bike path that was opened up there. And somebody complained, well, those cyclists, they don't contribute to anything to the economy. Why are we spending this money on a bike path? And I thought, next time you pass a serious sports cyclist, look at them. If their bike is, $3,000 and the stuff they're wearing and the gadgets that they're carrying are another $1,000 or more, don't you think they probably pay taxes somewhere
Exactly.
and probably pay their fair share for that bike lane.
I saw that column. I liked it.
All right, well, maybe we'll have to
But
go
I'm still
for a
scared to ride
someday.
across Pineda.
Well, I don't blame you. It wasn't exactly the most comfortable thing in the world, but I like the freedom to be able to do it.
Yep.
Other sports that happen in Brevard County, I know you're not involved with them necessarily, but I kind of want to get your take on the importance of them. Florida Tech football, something new.
Awesome. Big fan. I bought season tickets right away for my family. And I think what we have in this area that I've really tried to embrace and work with is Patrick Air Force Base and Florida Tech. And now with Eastern BCC becoming a 4-year college, we have 2 4-year colleges in this county. It's just remarkable. But Florida Tech, I mean, if you look at the things they've done, and I read some comments from Dr. Catney's in the paper this morning, that school is just incredible. Not only as an engineering, oceanography, technical school, they have the Scott Center for Autism treatment, just really a lot of good stuff going on. But, I mean, football, that's pretty much the next thing. You look at what Dr. Catney's did with Florida Atlantic University when he started that team, and what it's done for that school since. It's a great revenue producer. But I like to say that Florida Tech football is the best thing to happen in Melbourne since the Melbourne Marathon.
Well, it was definitely packed the first night that I went down there for the spring game, and I couldn't believe that the entire stadium was filled for that, just to watch a scrimmage, really.
At a high school stadium.
Yeah. What about the Nationals and spring training and all the baseball that's going on?
I think the Nationals are good too. I mean, how could you want to get rid of a team that's based in the nation's capital? I mean, the Nats they're tied to Washington, D.C., and people in Washington know where they spring train. I mean, maybe it doesn't bring money year-round like some people say, but, you know, they do have maintenance people that are working here year-round. They have the minor league team, the Manatees, and I just don't understand why you would want to let something like that go, because, you know, my belief is you let it go, and I haven't done a lot of homework on the Nationals, but if you let them go, what's going to make somebody else want to come here?
Right. So. At least you have something to work with at this point.
Yeah.
And it probably is making some money, you know, in terms of economic activity and impact. And
I mean, these players are staying in apartments out there, and the Manatees are living in apartments. They're buying cars.
Right.
Definitely, it's bringing money. They're eating in restaurants. Yeah.
Security after the Boston Marathon, big deal. What kind of considerations do you have to put in terms of safety and security for participants in events?
Yeah. The only major event I've done since Boston was the Rocket Man Triathlon. Okay. And what I did is I went back to NASA, and I went back at City of Titusville Police, and I said, okay, what do you want me to do? What are we going to do here? And we had a powwow about it, and I let the police officers, Brevard County sheriffs were involved, I let them tell me what to do, because I'm not a police officer. I have no idea what's safety and what's not. But I'm going to do what you tell me to do is how I operate. And they basically just let everybody work in transition. You were still allowed to bring backpacks in and bring your bikes in and get set up for the race. But what they did is once we sealed off transition, well, they actually had a bomb-sniffing dog at transition, just kind of as people checked in. And then it went around transition for like 20 minutes when the athletes weren't there. Dog was happy, police were happy, and that was that.
I bet the triathletes felt better too.
They did. It was a noticeable presence with them walking around with their dog.
I thought I noticed a term and a story about that in our archives about terrorism insurance that you can get. What is that?
You can buy terrorism insurance, and I've always declined it with my events. And again, I haven't put on a major, I did Rocket Man, and I did decline it for Rocket Man because the police gave me so much comfort that everything would be fine. And, but I might look at it for another race, but it's always been like it's not a lot of money, it might be now, but it was always just an extra $100 you could buy terrorism insurance.
Really? Interesting.
Because before Boston, who would have ever thought of anything like that? You know, that somebody would want to kill runners and spectators.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's a spectacular building or something like that, but I guess the human grief and suffering and story was big enough for them, certainly.
And yeah.
Talk about Brevard's niche. Earlier in the show, we were talking about what we have. We have 72 miles of beach in the Indian River, running, surfing. Is that it? I mean, what do you see our place in sort of the whole national scene of? Yeah,
you know, obviously we're known as the Space Coast. We're also known as Cocoa Beach, but you know, we've seen what's happened with the space program. We hung our hat on it, or at least Titusville and other areas did, and you know, right or wrong, they're paying for it right now. And space may very well come back, but I think what we need to be looking at as a county, we still have a lot of really good stuff going on in the south end, Harris, you know, the Inner's Hill, the DRS, all those companies that are down there. But I think what we do have, Matt, that others don't is, again, 72 miles of oceanfront. We have a national seashore up there, Canaveral National Seashore. We have Sebastian Inlet State Park on the south end. We have Cocoa Beach, all the beaches, all the surfing, awesome fishing in our area. In fact, the redfish capital of the world, I think you could argue, would be Titusville. Great snook fishing down at Sebastian Inlet, trout fishing, good surf fishing, the boating. I mean, I think this is what we need to focus on: kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, everything that we have here that maybe they can't do over in Orlando or at Disney World or maybe in other areas of the state. I mean, we have more coastline and more riverfront coastline than anybody else. That's what we should be focusing on.
It sounds like we almost need some sort of decathlon of water events, you know, including swimming, surfing, paddleboarding, sailing, fishing, I don't know, fishing, something like that.
Gosh, it sounds like my Beach and Boards Fest that we're doing with Ron Johns.
Can you win an Ironman kind of a medal for doing that?
Maybe that's the next event.
The best in show. There has to be some waterman or waterwoman around Brevard County who would just, you know, rise to the top of something like that.
You would think so, yeah.
That's great. Well, have you heard of the collegiate bass fishing championship or series that's been happening this year?
I think I know some of the guys that have been involved with it, and again, let's do it here. Is the tournament happening in Brevard County?
I don't know.
Okay, I think we should. As part of what we do with the Beach and Boards Fest is we have collegiate kiteboarding, collegiate surfing, pro surfing, and we also do the collegiate beach volleyball tournament. And last year we had 6 colleges come, and probably going to have 8 this year. So I think that's a big focus. It's not all about, you know, going to Panama City or South Beach and just partying. I mean, it is and it isn't, but I think that we have so much going on here that we can create what we've done with Beach and Boards Fest, a different active lifestyle event.
Very good. Mitch Barnes, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, that's it for today's show. Remember, you can comment on anything you saw in today's program by sending me an email. Address it to letters@floridatoday.com. Thanks for joining us. I hope to see you here next week on The Matt Reed Show.